Welcome into a bonus episode of Hockey Inside Out. For next year, the Montreal Canadiens, looking at the lineup. How many of the 5 rookie defensemen that played this season will be in the opening day lineup in October?
Well, in my list, 3 of them in Barron, Jacky, and Gouli, I think is a no-brainer with, the way that they've handled themselves and the opportunity that they've been given and responded. And those type of young guys that have handled themselves as well as they have, what a future for them, moving forward. So I really believe that these kids, I call them kids, but they're, inexperienced, but they have gained it with the opportunity to play a lot of situations this year through injury, and have had a real good chance to develop and hone their skills to the point where I believe that those guys will be a very big part of the team, and we're going to continue to progress and show that they're real good players and have a bright future in the Montreal Canadiens blue line.
Yeah, I think all 5 of them are back. I think Harris, Goulet, Jacky, Kovacevic, and Barron are all back next season. I think they're with Mike Matheson and David Savard. Joel Edmundson wants to come back to Montreal. I asked him about that recently. He'd love to come back here. He thinks he improved as a leader this year in the room, almost out of necessity with being so many young players and not many older guys. But I think Kent Hughes will try and move him over the summer. If he had been healthy, I think he would have moved him at the trade deadline this year. And I think Chris Weidman is another guy they might try to move out. I can see them having, if you have the 5 rookies and you have Matheson and Savard, is obviously one odd man out. So you could almost have the rookies sort of rotate, being one guy out. It'll create some competition amongst themselves to stay in the lineup. I think that would be a good situation for them. With Weidman, either they move him, maybe they put him on waivers. If he clears, he goes down to Laval. If he went down to Laval, he'd be an amazing player at the AHL level. And he'd also be a guy who wouldn't complain. He's a really good character guy. He wouldn't go down there and mope or sulk. He'd be a good guy down there. In the same way, Carl Ausner, when he got sent down to Laval, was a good guy down there, character type of guy. So I think all 5 of these guys have shown that they can play in the NHL. The question is what's the ceiling for them? And will they continue to progress, or sophomore jinx is a thing in sports. Who will progress next season and who might fall back? You can't think all 5 of them are going to improve. The odds are one of them or maybe 2 of them will fall off a little bit. But I think all 5 of them have shown during difficult circumstances this season that they can play in the NHL. Barron was sent down to they gave him every opportunity to make the team at a training camp, and he just didn't look. He wasn't good enough. They sent him down to Laval. He came back up. He played with a lot more confidence, a little bit more physical also, which is something they wanted out of him. So I'd be surprised if all 5 of them aren't with the team when next season starts.
Yeah, it seems like all 5 of them are NHL players, right? I think that's the biggest thing. I wouldn't be surprised if 1 or even 2 players starts the year in Laval, just because the Joel Edmundson thing, I know that the organization thinks he's a good leader and everything like that, but at a certain point, you've got to contribute a bit more on the ice. And watching Joel Edmundson, I don't see the physicality that he used to have. It shows up very rarely, usually after a play is done, a cross-check in a guy's back like he did to Michael Bunting. But he's not really engaged physically in the same way that David Savard is, where I know Savard is he's not Shea Weber, but I'll borrow the nickname and call him a man mountain, because he really is he's a beast of a man. And I wonder if Edmundson's back is preventing him from getting involved in physical altercations. And he's played since the trade deadline. I think that's a good indicator that he could have value and be traded. It gives GMs confidence that he can play for stretches. But I do worry if he's just not the same player that he was, even last year. And that's tough for the Montreal Canadiens to move. So if they're forced to continue on with Joel Edmundson and you still have Savard and Matheson in the lineup, you can't carry a bunch of rookies and healthy scratch a bunch of them. It makes more sense to give them a ton of playing time in Laval. A guy like Arbor Xhekaj, for example, who I know is a fan favorite, they rolled him out on the power play in the NHL a few times this year. Maybe he goes down, he's the number 1 defenseman in Laval, number 1 guy on the power play. Then he can develop areas of his game that he wouldn't have a chance to do in the NHL, and comes back up halfway through the season a much better player, similar to what Justin Barron did this year. So there's nobody, I think, who's immune to that kind of treatment next year except for Kovacevic, maybe, who is waiver eligible, so you don't really want to risk sending him down. I think the takeaway for fans should be don't panic if your favorite guy gets sent down, because it's probably not going to be for very long, and development can take place in different leagues, so it's not going to ruin them.
Yeah, I think you're right, Andrew, because, I mean, as I said, they'd like to move Edmundson. I'm sure they'll try to move him this summer. But you're right, he hasn't been that physical. He's playing like a guy who just wants to get through this season without any more back problems, right? Mm-hmm. He looks very hesitant out there. It's a chronic back issue. It's understandable. I mean, they're not going to the playoffs, so it looks like he's just trying to get through this season without getting hurt. But that chronic back issue will be an issue for other teams who might have interest in him. But he's heading into the last season of his contract, so if they can't move, Kent Hughes isn't going to give him away for nothing, I don't think. So if they get into next season and he can play next season and stay healthy and be a little bit more physical, you'll get more for him at the trade deadline next year than you probably would this summer. So that's a possible scenario there also. And as you're right, I mean, sending one of the younger guys down to Laval wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have them play, Mike Matheson type minutes in the AHL, power play and penalty kill and everything else. So they're in a situation, again, I'm sure Kent Hughes will try to move Joel Edmundson, but I don't think he'll give him up for nothing. And if the offers that he's getting aren't enough, that he thinks he can get more at the trade deadline next season, when Edmondson's going into this contract's going to be over, so the team picking him up would just be for that season on the playoff run, and then he'd be gone. I think that would be what would happen if he doesn't get what he likes during the summer.
Sorry, I neglected Jordan Harris in that group. He's a great kid and progressing nicely. So he's in my mix as one of the ones that will play next year. And you guys have touched on Edmundson. I'm disappointed in his overall play. I thought he would bring a lot more than what he has. He just looks disinterested. He doesn't seem to be committed in making the opposition pay the price anymore. And maybe it's his back, but that's not the type of guy that you want to have just hanging around. The game is about mobility. The game is about let's go, high tempo. He doesn't seem to be, cut to make that type of action happen. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him, moving forward as they try to analyze who are the guys that are going to do the job for them for most of the year.
Rick, I know we're tight on time, but as a former player, how do you balance that at the end of a season on a team like the Washington Capitals when you were drafted that have nothing to really play for at the end of the year? Maybe you've got an injury that you don't want to make worse. How do you balance giving it all and laying it out on the line? Because I feel like you're sometimes more likely to get injured if you're not giving it all and you're unprepared for a hit or something and it takes you off guard versus just keeping yourself moderately healthy to start the offseason on the right foot.
Well, I think for at least, for me, it's pride in the job well done. No matter what, it was tough in Washington because you were losing all the time. But as a professional, you wanted to, basically make a statement and show that you are exactly that, a professional. You're paid to do a job, and that's what you did each and every night, each and every shift. So, people talk about they want to just play so they don't get hurt. Well, that's usually when you do get hurt, and I think the mindset, at least speaking personally, was show up, do what you're supposed to do each shift and each night, and feel good at the end of the game, knowing that you did the best you can do. And whatever happens, at that point happens.
Yeah, I mean, Edmundson is a competitor and a physical player. We saw that during the playoff run to the Stanley Cup final. I think he just doesn't trust his back right now. I think he's limited in what he can do.
Well, I think now looking towards the future, I feel like all three of you guys have the 5 rooks playing pretty much opening day here. I think it's going to be 18 months from now where the competition will be really at its highest with Lane Hudson, Struble, and others who might be in that circle trying to get into that top rotation moving forward for the Habs down the road. Don't forget to submit your questions and comments here on Hockey Inside Out. We look forward to conversing about that. Check out the YouTube page for Hockey Inside Out episodes. And for the newsletter, head on by the MontrealGazette.com/newsletters for the full inside look at the Montreal Canadiens. And for bonus content and full episodes, head on by Hockey Inside Out on On behalf of Rick, Andrew, and Stu, we wish you a great week. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.